How long, O Lord, will you ignore me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will I have cares on my mind and grief in my heart all day? How long will my enemy have the upper hand? Look at me, answer me, O Lord, my God. That's the translation from the Jewish Publication Society's Tanakh version of this psalm. It's one of the many laments in Hebrew scriptures. It follows a familiar formula of the lament. It starts with an invocation, a turning toward God, who is the source in Jewish theology both of all that is good and all that is painful. In the turning, the lament brings a complaint to God. It brings a petition, an ask. In this case, look at me, answer me. And the lament always, always, always ends with some kind of expression of trust. In preparing for this sermon, I discovered that in the Hebrew language, that expression of trust, which feels a little bit tacked on to me, like the editor said, no, we can't include this psalm in the Bible unless we end on a high note. It's actually really messy in the Hebrew. The verb tenses are usually all jumbled and too complex to really translate into English. And that makes really good sense to me, because when you have cares on your mind all day, and grief in your heart day after day, it's hard to know whether you're coming or going. It's hard to know how much time has passed. And is this going to last forever? Am I always going to feel this way? And so I actually feel a little better about that expression of trust at the end, because it says, but I've trusted in your faithfulness, and I feel like you've let me down. What about that promise you made to me? Why didn't you keep it and keep the one I loved safe? I appreciate that the expression of aspirational as much as anything else. I have trusted you in the past, and so I hope that the day will come again when you do look at me, when you do meet my eyes again, God, or maybe when I can meet your eyes again, and I can feel like, once again, I know what it is to be saved and kept safe by you. I've been thinking a lot about sad songs lately, like the one expressed in this lament. I've been thinking about sad stories and why we tell them. You know, the last time I was here at Second, it was the first Sunday in June, and Pastor Crystal was preaching about the call story of Jephthah, one of Israel's judges. She was focused on the first part of his story, but as soon as his name is called, I can't help but go to the end of his story. And the horrible, horrible ending where he feels the need to sacrifice his daughter to keep a foolish vow that he made to God. That following weekend, Nathan and I went home to Pittsburgh for my niece's high school graduation party, but my joy in her celebrating her achievement was mingled with this quiet grief. Not only because every family gathering brings up the grief of Shaquille's absence in a more way, but also because I knew that our next family gathering would be the following weekend in Virginia, when we funeralized my mom's only sister, my Aunt Marge, who had passed away that first weekend in June. So we've got these sad stories, these sad songs, and they sit right against the joys and the celebrations of life, right? Nathan and I were packing for a long-awaited vacation to Puerto Rico, and we were packing for my aunt's funeral. We were convening with extended family and sharing in the celebrations and the amazement of how everyone has grown and matured, but also hearing my uncle's anguished stories about my aunt's final days. What's the phrase from that old hymn? Sorrow and love flow mingled down. And then on vacation under the Caribbean sun, I chose to read the script of one of my favorite musicals, Hadestown. It's no spoiler alert to say that the Tony Award-winning musical but by Anais Mitchell is a tragedy. The narrator tells you that in the opening song when he introduces himself saying, "See, someone's got to tell the tale, whether or not it turns out well. Maybe it will turn out this time." It's a sad tale, he adds to be clear. It's a tragedy. We're going to sing it anyway. We sang a sad song today when we sang together, "Lift Every Voice and Sing." It is, if you didn't notice, a lament. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod. We walk a way that with tears has been watered, but we sing it anyway. So Hadestown is based on two Greek myths. They're both tragedies. The backdrop is the tumultuous love story of Hades, who is god of the underworld, Persephone, goddess of spring. They spend their entire marriage separated every 6 months. She's miserable in the underworld for 6 months, and he's happy, and then he's miserable in the underworld when she goes back to the sunlit lands, bringing spring with her. But the heart of the musical is really about a mortal couple, Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus is a young musician. He's the son of a muse. Eurydice is a young woman who's hungry and hardened by suffering. In the musical, as in so much of life, the sadness of their stories is interwoven with the joyful, the beautiful, the hopeful. When Eurydice is skeptical about Orpheus's love, throughout Act 1, he works on a song for her. It's his epic song, and he promises her that when the song is finished, it will bring the world back in tune. Isn't that a powerful notion? That a song can bring the world back into tune. If only we could bring our world back into tune that easily. Orpheus, as many musicians do, he gets lost in his music. Eurydice is left to fend for herself, even though he promised her that he would always be at her side. And in his absence, she is wooed by Hades himself to find security and warmth in his underground kingdom. She doesn't realize it involves signing away her soul for everlasting enslavement. And when Orpheus returns home, joyful and victorious with his completed song, he finds Eurydice missing, and he decides to follow her down to Hadestown. And it's the strength of his song that allows him to pass safely through the walls. He even sings it to Hades himself, the skeptical and somewhat sadistic king of the underworld. And the song softens the king, reminding him of long ago when he and Persephone, his own wife, were new in love. And so Orpheus persuades Hades to release Eurydice from her enslavement, and Hades agrees. There's a catch, of course. There's always a catch in Greek mythology when you're making a deal with the gods. Hades will agree to release Eurydice, and he will even let the rest of the enslaved workers go, but they must walk in single file with Orpheus out in front. And Orpheus must walk alone and never once look back to see if his love and the rest of the workers are following. You can guess what happens. I've already told you this is a tragedy. Orpheus leads the way, singing his powerful, transforming song, and Eurydice and the workers are following right behind him, singing along with him. But it's a long road riddled with danger, winding through darkness. They keep on walking, faithfully, trustingly, together in single file, until they are within sight of the sunlit world. The light is going to envelop Orpheus if he takes just one more step. But then he pauses and he looks back. The staging of the moment in the musical is a moment of suspended agony. The eyes of the two lovers meet, but in doing so, because they do so, they are lost to each other forever. The music continues to play that beautiful song, but the stage revolves downward, taking Eurydice and the workers into the bowels of the earth, leaving behind alone, with the narrator and the audience as witnesses to the tragic end. The first time I saw the show, it wrecked me. How could it not? We had recently lost Diehl. But I found myself wondering, how could the actors go through it themselves? Over and over again, 8 shows a week. The show is just deeply, deeply emotional, and words fail. And yet I keep going back to see it again. 3 times and counting, because I promise you, when I finish reading the writer's book about how she wrote the show, we are going back to see it again. Why does this tragic tale have such a pull on me? Why was I drawn to this sad song in Scripture for today's sermon? I've been struggling to find an answer for myself, because I promise you, even before losing Diehl, choosing a tragedy over a comedy has always been out of character for me. I like a happily ever after. But I realize that as people of faith, we do the same thing. We come together each Sunday, first Sunday of the month, and commemorate the Last Supper in remembrance of Jesus' suffering and death. We sing the sorrow songs of the canon of spirituals. And our pastor has often preached from the text of R&B music, what James Cone calls secular spirituals, because the blues were written in the era of Jim Crow. As a Christian church, we include psalms of lament, including today's text, in our lectionary readings, and we return over and over again to Bible stories that are steeped in human suffering. Adam and Eve expelled from Eden, Cain's murder of his brother Abel, the rejection of Ishmael and Hagar by Abraham and Sarah, the near sacrifice of Isaac by his own father, the infertility of Israel's matriarchs, the enslavement of the Hebrew people, a generation dying in the wilderness, the suffering of countless nameless women, including Jephthah's daughter. The list goes on and on. It isn't just the biblical stories of suffering and loss. We have our own tragic tales to tell, and tell them we must. We tell them in Sunday morning service when we share our prayer requests, as well as our praise reports. We gather in support groups when we are grieving, when we are struggling with addiction, when we are recovering from trauma. We tell our own stories, and we hear the stories of others. Why do we keep telling the tragic tales? Why do we sing the sad songs? In the musical Hadestown, that agonizing moment when Orpheus turns back, seeing Eurydice following right behind him, only to watch her and the others descend back to the underworld again. The music sustains on a fateful chord, and then the narrator steps forward again. He begins to sing a reprise, the exact same words with which he opened the show. He breaks the fourth wall, looking out at the audience, and he sings to us directly. It's an old song. It's a tragedy. And the first time we saw the show, the actor who played that narrator, Andre de Shields, the great one, put an inflection on that line when he looked at us. It's a tragedy, he said. I told you so. This to me, who is sobbing in her seat. It's an old song. It's a love song, but it's a sad song and a tragedy. But, he tells us, we're going to sing it again and again and again. And it's not just the actors doing it, performing the show 8 times a week. The characters themselves, even as he sings the reprise, reset the stage. Have you ever seen the movie Groundhog Day? Rewind, reset. They recreate their first entrances. They repeat their first lines. Eurydice and Orpheus meet again for the first time, and he's still working on that song that when it's finished will bring the world back into tune. And what I love about this show, one of many things about it, is the narrator's exclamation of why in response to the audience's unspoken lament. In the reprise, he says, because here's the thing. To know how it ends and still begin to sing it again as if it might turn out this time. I learned that from a friend of mine who could make you see how the whole world could be in spite of the way it is. To know how it ends and still begin to sing it again as if it might turn out this time. That's learning to see how the world could be in spite of the way that it is. Company sings together. It's a sad song, but we keep singing even so. It's an old song, an old tale from way back when, and we're going to sing it again and again. We're going to sing it again. In her book, the songwriter Anais Mitchell confides that reprise wasn't even written until the show was already in previews off Broadway. And her first attempt, she admits, went horribly wrong. And she realized that what was required was a delicate emotional transition between Orpheus's turn, when he tragically fails the test that was designed to fail, and what I hoped would be an uplifting ending in spite of it. She says it was important to dwell in the tragedy without wallowing in it, to move on, but not too quickly. It is important to dwell in our tragedies. Whether it's the old story of Jesus' passion or the new old story of my loss and your loss? Not to wallow in them, but to give them the space and the messiness that they need and that our spirits need. Because first and foremost, why do we sing a sad song? Because we are sad. That's how sad songs get written. The tragic tales must be told because our hearts and our minds and our spirits cry out to be heard, to be seen, to be known. We sing because our love lives on and our sadness reaches beyond death itself, to declare that that love was real. Sad songs are not, even in the Bible, are not merely a means to an end, an orderly sonnet or a moralistic ditty to tidy up the mess of our sorrow and pain. Our laments are wrenched from us in a desperate turning to God, voicing our complaint, asking the Lord to turn once again to see us and respond to our pain. Let us never forget that when we hear a sad song, it was born of a broken heart, a heart in need of compassion and care. There's another reason, though, that I think we keep on singing the sad songs. We sing them because we are resilient, and the tragic tales become testimonies to how we got over, or at least to how we are getting through. I hear that resilience in the coming out stories of my LGBT friends, stories that often speak of deep grief and terrifying trauma, to cruel judgments and callous rejections. Yet those same stories of coming out, even and especially the sad ones, are testimonies to other queer folks that it really does get better. And to those of us who would be allies, who would love our queer brothers and sisters and siblings as God does, that advocacy and affirmation are still needed to prevent further tragedy. Can't you see that even in the tragic tale of Orpheus? By turning back, he failed Hades' test. But in the turning, Orpheus could still glimpse what his song had wrought. His singing had made the world a better place, if only for a moment in time. It converted the heart of a king. It redeemed the life of his lover. It inspired courage among the downtrodden workers. It nearly ushered them into the sunlit, dare I say, promised land, marching together in a song that might have been sad, but it was also a song of solidarity. And isn't that another reason to keep on singing the sad songs? Not only to remember and lament, not only to testify to our resilience and inspire the courage of others, but also, I believe, to resist. The act of creation and collaboration has power in it, and singing is together an act of collaboration. When we tell a tragic tale, we stir up in ourselves a spirit that longs to bring the world into tune. We call out what is broken and unjust and death-dealing. We see that the test is too often rigged, and we call for others to stand with us, resist with us, and overturn the tables to rebalance the scales. We dare to hope that by singing again, this time, the outcome might be different. Hadestown offers one more song before the metaphorical curtain falls. Back in the underworld, where they have all descended, the women, Persephone and Eurydice, are passing around the wine and the cups. And they are urging the workers, and off-Broadway, the audience, to partake. In a song called We Raise Our Cups, they honor the absent Orpheus. They celebrate his resilience by comparing him to the birds that sing, not in the sunshine, but in the darkness of night. They compare him not to the flowers that emerge in the spring, but those that break through the winter snow. They sing the words, wherever he is wandering, alone upon the earth, let all our singing follow him and bring him comfort. That drinking song, at least to me, feels like a kind of Holy Communion, a memorial meal honoring the love and the loss. The songwriter explains, we raise our cups to Orpheus not because he succeeds, but because he tries. We understand implicitly that there's value in his trying and even in his failure. Can't we do the same as people of faith? As people of resurrection, even in the shadow of death? By singing the sad songs and telling the tragic tales, as a community of faith, we may yet be able to defy whatever voices in our heads or in our lives tell us that we are alone, that God has forgotten us, that family and friends have abandoned us. By singing the songs together, we see and we are seen, and we are better able to honor one another for trying, even if in our trying we fail. This is our commitment as the body of Christ. Members of this Second Baptist Church of Germantown, when we covenant each month to share each other's joys and bear one another's sorrows. We keep on singing the sad songs, and in the remembering, we find resilience to walk on together and to resist. And so we'll keep singing again and again and again. Amen.